Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending our Engaging Elected Officials webinar. And we're just getting started. If you have any trouble hearing us, then please feel free to let us know either in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll try to help you there. We also have closed captioning available, and so feel free to turn that on your individual screens. There should be a box in that black bar for you to turn on closed captioning. So welcome to this presentation. We're very excited. My name is Maggie Woznicki, Member Services Specialist, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Maddie Smith, and I am the Communication Specialist for Iowa CASA. Pronouns are he, him, and his.
And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And we just wanted to show you a little picture of us here.
Hello.
We are trying to stay as warm as possible. Is anyone else working from home or working from their offices? I hope you all are staying warm. All right. Curled up with a cat at home. That
Nice.
Sounds lovely. Awesome. So today we are going to be talking about the logistics for our Day at the Capitol that is happening on Wednesday, February 20th. We're just going to spend a brief amount of time on that for those of you that have never been before. We're going to talk about Iowa CASA's key legislative issues this year, and we're going to spend some time talking about some strategies that will help you as you communicate with your legislators. And then towards the end, for those of you that work at nonprofits or in victim services, we'll spend a couple minutes just talking about what is okay to do as a nonprofit worker as far as lobbying or legislative advocacy goes, and then just point you to some more resources.
Cool. So we're going to start off with a poll. The poll is, how many times have you participated in an advocacy day at the Capitol with either Iowa CASA or the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence? Let me bring up the poll here real quick. Oh, and actually before that, let's find out who's on the call today. So we want to know whether you are a victim service provider or a community member, so feel free to fill that out. Looks like most people so far are from victim service programs, which is awesome. And sharing the results there. So about 95% are from victim service programs, and then looks like 2% are community,
5%.
or 5%, excuse me, are community members. So excited to have you. Thank you so much. And now we're going to ask, how many times have you participated in an advocacy day at the Capitol? We'll close the poll here in just a few seconds.
Well, we have a lot of new folks joining us. That's awesome.
All right, and so it looks like a majority of folks, 44%, this will be their first time participating. We have some who have done this a few times before, and 5 or more times, 11%, not bad. Awesome, guys. Well, we're excited to talk more with you today and looking forward to sharing some information and having you all at our Advocacy Day at the Capitol.
All right. All right, so just to brief you all about kind of the logistics of the day, we are going to be starting our day at the Wallace Building. That is a building that is kind of across the street from the Capitol, so you have the address there. and then we'll walk over to the Capitol building. There is parking. There's a parking ramp right next to or adjacent to the Wallace building, and some more parking on the opposite side of the Capitol. And so there will be a little bit of walking. And so if the weather is anything like today, hopefully not, but no matter what, you might want to have your jacket or warm weather gear available. There is some coat racks and things like that in the Capitol. So we'll start off right at 9 o'clock a.m. So if you can arrive prior to that to get all of the materials from ICAPA and Advocacy that we'll be handing you that day to sign in. And then we'll do about an hour of training about updates about key pieces of legislation. Since that will be a few weeks from now, things move quickly at the Capitol. So we'll update you all. And then we'll head over as a group to the Capitol building, where we'll be at the first floor is where we'll enter, and then we'll go up to the top floor where we'll meet with our legislators.
And yes, it is always helpful to carpool. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, absolutely. And if folks want to park in the Advocacy or ICAPA parking lot, that is definitely okay to do, and then carpool over to the Capitol. So if anyone even wants, some coalition members to, drive them over, that's absolutely okay. Just email one of us and we can arrange that. So here are a couple links as far as making sure that the event is accessible and comfortable for you all. There is information about accessibility on the Iowa Legislative website, and then there's information about how to request accommodations through Advocacy available in our event registration link. And if neither of those work for you, feel free to just call, text, or email me.
And we're going to be sending out all the links, the hyperlinks from this webinar out to folks as well afterwards. So,
yes. So just to get us started so we're all on the same page, what is legislative advocacy and why do we do it? So here we have that it's efforts to influence the introduction, enactment, or changes of legislation. It requires contacting your legislators, sharing your views on any issues, and asking your legislators to vote a specific way. So it's really just educating the folks that we've elected or that are in the Capitol working about what's important to us. And it's really important because if we don't do that, then they're not going to know that their constituents, their community members care about that issue. They're not going to have the right information about the issue. So it's so vital that all of you are out in the community talking to your elected officials about what's important to you.
All right, so what are the issues? We are going to take some time to go over the main issues that we're wanting to focus on heading into this year's Advocacy Day on February 20th. We recommend that when having discussions with legislators, you choose one of these issues to focus on, but have information about all of them to hand off to your legislator after your conversation. No one bullet point is more important than the other. I always like to stress that. We will provide talking points on all these issues after today's webinar, so you can study up and let us know if you have any questions ahead of time. Don't be afraid to let us know if you don't understand something. This stuff can get pretty complicated, so questions are encouraged. So the first point that I wanted to go over is sustained funding for victim services. This is one of those things that we talk about almost every year. State funding and appropriations budgets are typically determined later in the spring, around April, which is why there is no bill number that's attached to this particular item. However, we always like to get a jump start on talking about sustained funding that allows victim service programs to serve and support survivors. This is the money that keeps the doors open for programs that act as a lifeline for survivors, and it's very important that this funding is sustained. 2 years ago, as I'm sure some of you are aware, we saw a 26% cut to this funding, and it's definitely had an impact. We don't want to see that happen again. Obviously, sustained funding is crucial to enabling sexual assault programs to improve and expand services to meet the diverse needs of all survivors. And to give you a little bit of perspective, last year we saw victim service advocates serve 17,103 sexual assault survivors. That's a 20% increase from the previous year. So in order for us to continue to expand services to survivors, we need sustained funding.
And if I may interrupt, if any of you have like questions about any one of these, feel free to put them in the chat box, or we can open up questions at the end as well.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Maggie. So the second point I wanted to touch on is especially timely with recent revelations of abuse within spiritual communities. For example, the Catholic Church. House Study Bill 26 would eliminate the criminal statute of limitations for sexual assaults against minors. We are registered in support of this bill. Currently, the statute of limitations for minors is 10 years after they turn 18. Research shows that it can take many years, even decades, for survivors to come forward about what happened to them. So for this reason, we think it's really important to eliminate the statute of limitations for childhood sexual assault survivors. This provides additional options for those who may choose to come forward later in life. So this third point is a little bit more complicated, so we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about this. I want to first take a moment to thank NISA African Family Services for helping us develop talking points in opposition to the criminalization of female genital cutting. NISA has done a great job working with survivors impacted by this, and they have been generous enough to help educate me and others on this incredibly important issue. So I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about what female genital cutting is. This is a cultural practice in Africa and some parts of the Middle East and Asia. It's considered to be a rite of passage for young girls in some communities and is most often performed between the ages of 5 and 10. This consists of the partial or total removal of the clitoris and is believed to preserve a female's chastity before marriage and discourage sexual desire and premarital sex because female virginity is seen as important within the community. Female genital cutting reflects and perpetuates gender inequality and is a form of oppression as it violates a woman's right to health, to security, and to life, especially when the practice results in death. So there has been a bill introduced, House File 63. It is a bill that would criminalize female genital cutting in Iowa. It would make it punishable by a prison sentence of no more than 5 years and a fine of not more than $7,500. So Iowa CASA actually opposes this bill. We oppose criminalization of female genital cutting because we believe that criminalizing this practice before educating communities would cause more harm to already vulnerable populations who have sought refuge in Iowa. Many of these people have fled here to avoid civil war, political instability, torture, and sexual assault in refugee camps. By criminalizing female genital cutting, communities would very likely become more divided instead of working together towards solutions. Communities would become more discreet in their practices if they believe there to be a cultural interference from systems seen as having power and control. As a result, communities are more likely to seek underground means of carrying out female genital cutting, either in the United States or in transporting children to their native countries. This would make victims of female genital cutting more vulnerable and further traumatized by shame, guilt, and abuse. So working with communities directly impacted by female genital cutting, we believe a better alternative is outreach and education to communities from community insiders. These would be people who understand the practice and can better support survivors through bicultural and multilingual services. In addition, we believe that education for healthcare professionals and at pediatric clinics would better meet victims and families' needs. And again, we will be providing talking points to you after the webinar, which goes into more details. And NISA African Family Services is also available, I'm sure, to answer any questions that folks may have. So the final point I wanted to touch on is sexual harassment policies in employment. House File 110 is a bill that creates a new code section related to sexual harassment in employment in the Iowa Civil Rights Act. Okay, so yeah, good question, actually. Sorry, I'm gonna back up 1 second. There was a question, who is targeted for imprisonment under House File 63, victims, practitioners, or parents and caretakers? That's a really great question, partly because it's not spelled out in the legislation, so that is something of a question of concern. There is a possibility that families would actually be separated if there is a family member who is wanting to do this practice. They could potentially be open to imprisonment through this bill. And then it becomes a question of who this bill targets, and those conversations, I think, are just really starting to take place at the legislature, but there's a lot of, I think one could say, misguided notions about what criminalization will actually do, which is why we want to get ahead of this and really work to educate legislators about the further harm that could occur through criminalization. So I hope that that helps to answer that question.
Yeah, and any questions that you ask today, we will be sure to also forward to our Iowa CASA lobbyist, Amy Campbell, and then she can provide us with further information that we can send out to you all.
So House File 110, this would require employers to adopt a written policy against sexual harassment and encourage employers and labor organizations to conduct annual education and training programs on sexual harassment. Recent events here in Iowa and across the nation, for that matter, have clearly illustrated how much work needs to be done to curb a culture that allows sexual violence and harassment to permeate. So, in the past year, state legislators from across the country have introduced over 100 bills to strengthen protections against workplace harassment. This is a statistic from the National Women's Law Center. Notably, Iowa is not one of those states that has put forth any legislation. We believe that it's time for our elected officials to take action to empower and protect Iowa workers. We believe that all workers benefit from safer and more accountable workplaces that are free from sexual misconduct. So these are the main issues that we're focusing on today. I want to point out that this is not an exhaustive list of all the bills that we are working on this legislative session. Keep in mind that other issues may come up, and if that occurs, we will let everyone know ahead of the February 20th day at the Capitol. So another great way to track legislation is through the Iowa CASA Bill Tracker. This is a really handy tool from our lobbyist advocacy cooperative. And what this does is it lists all the bills that Iowa CASA is either opposed to or in support of, or just tracking or monitoring. So you can look up specific bill numbers or just kind of see what we have on the docket as far as items of interest. And when you click on each one, it provides a description. It says what our position is on it and what the status is. So hopefully that is helpful. Again, we will include that link with materials that we're going to be sending out to folks here. So another poll here, how comfortable do you feel talking to legislators? So for those of you where this is your first time, don't be shy. So yikes, talking to legislators freaks me out. I'll do it, but I'd rather be watching Netflix. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but I usually don't mind, especially if there's free food. I have my legislator on speed dial.
And just for clarification, we will not have free food at this event. We will have a list of nearby restaurants.
Thank you for pointing that out, Maggie. Unfortunately, yes, lunch is on your own, which may actually
change the numbers.
Change the numbers slightly. If there's no free food, I'd rather be watching Netflix, right? Okay, so I am going to share the results here. So it's pretty evenly split.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
This is very cool.
So all of you that say I have my legislator on speed dial, please be like an assistant or an advocate to all those that say, yikes, talking to legislators freaks me out. One thing that we had talked about prior to this webinar is that feel free to just like go to someone else's meeting, even if they're not your legislator, just to hear them talk before you have a conversation, or grab a coalition staff member to just be there to support you. So we are here and available. We're, in this together. So please help each other out.
I have them on speed dial, says Haley, but they don't necessarily answer or return my correspondence. Yeah, that happens. Thank you for sharing. Okay.
All right, so before we move forward about how to communicate with legislators, we first have to know who they are, right? So this is an easy way to find out. There are a lot of websites you can go to. And I'm not gonna spend much time like going to this specific website. We will share the link. But really all it is that you go here, you type in your address or your zip code or maybe your office address to find out who your senators and representatives are here in Iowa. So that's helpful to know. You should definitely figure that out before coming to the day at the Capitol, and that will be really important. It's really important to legislators to know that the people that they're talking to are actually their constituents or people in their community or that work in their community. So make sure that you let them know anytime that you're engaging with them. So this kind of is an always intimidating part to folks that have not been at the Capitol. So how you request an appointment, an in-person appointment. So anytime, and this is for the day at the Capitol, but also anytime that you are at the Capitol building and the legislature is in session, this is how you talk to your elected officials. So all you do is go up to the top floor, which is called the rotunda. You're going to go to the main door of the appropriate chamber. So one will say the House of Representatives and one will say the Senate. I'm sorry, located on the second floor, yeah. And then you're going to fill out these message slips, which I will show you in a minute. They have like the date, time, who you're trying to see, a little message, and then your name and contact information. And so you're going to fill those out by that door, either the House or the Senate, and you're going to give it to the doorkeeper. And then they're going to go and get your legislator when they're available and ready. So you're just going to wait around that area if you can, because all they do is kind of shout out your name when they are ready to meet. So a page will alert you if the legislator is unavailable, or the legislator will come out themselves. And so you're going to want to kind of stand nearby because they'll shout. And usually at Day of the Capitol, there's over 100 of us.
Yeah.
So we'll be pretty crowded during this time. Just make sure you have at least one representative from your group kind of waiting in the wings or standing nearby. And I'm going to share this video of us. We've taken off our winter gear. It was a little too warm here. So here's what the Senate looks like. Just these little pink slips. And then the House of Representatives looks like this. And that's it. They're just like these little slips with a few things that you have to fill out, and that's how you get to see them in person. Or what's really helpful, especially for these Day of the Capitals, when we have a lot of us there trying to meet with everyone, sometimes folks don't get in to meet with their legislators, unfortunately. It's just too busy. And so scheduling a meeting in advance is really a great idea. So you can email or phone the officials to schedule an appointment. Again, brief them on who you are, when you'd like to meet, and the reason for why you want to meet. Tell them that you're attending the ICADVA and Iowa CASA Day of the Capitol. So that would be an opportune time. Ask them when, that you just want a short amount of time, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. They're really busy that day, and frankly, all other days since our legislative session is so short. So if you can keep it as brief as possible, I think they would appreciate that. And then just follow up until you get a hold of someone and are able to confirm a meeting time. So hopefully that can work out for you. I know a few people did that last year, and they just met off in one of the rooms in the Capitol with their legislator for a private meeting, which was really helpful.
So we're going to go over some tips for talking to legislators. As a reminder, this PowerPoint will be available to folks after the webinar, along with all the links for resources. So we'll be sure to send that along here. Some helpful tips. So a lot of times at our Advocacy Day, people will come together in small groups. Sometimes if you come with a friend who lives down the street, you'll both have the same legislator that you want to talk with. So if you're comfortable doing so, I might recommend speaking to legislators in small groups, especially if you want to focus on the same message. If you do have a group, designate a spokesperson for the group who can start off the conversation with the legislator and then can help to introduce the other members of the group as well. You should also designate someone who can take notes during the conversation. This is really helpful so that everyone can be kind of working together. Tell your elected official who you are and where you're from. Make sure to identify yourself as a constituent. If you work for a victim service program, or if you are a community member, feel free to identify that way. In whatever way you're most comfortable with. You can also tell your legislator, as Maggie said, that you're here with Iowa CASA and ICADVA for the Advocacy Day. They generally will respond really well to that. One of the reasons that we'll be sending you the talking points after this webinar and before February 20th is so you can practice them. Now, I know that everybody on this webinar absolutely loves role play. And that's actually a really helpful way to kind of practice your talking points, or even as dorky as it sounds, practicing your talking points in a mirror. I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm constantly talking to myself in the mirror right before Advocacy Day, just trying to get myself familiar with what I want to talk about. So don't be afraid to do that. So legislators like to hear about real-world implications that bills could have. So talk about your own personal experience if you feel comfortable doing so, or tell a story about the victim service program in your area, how they helped X amount of survivors this year, and just relate it back to why the piece of information that you're touching on is so important. Try not to take up too much of your legislators' time. Be as courteous as possible, even if the legislator may not agree with you. That unfortunately does happen sometimes. Try to keep your talking points concise. Ask if the legislator has any questions. If your elected official does ask questions that you maybe don't know the answer to, that's perfectly fine. Always tell the truth, even if that means telling your legislator that you don't know the answer to their question. What we recommend in that scenario is to let them know that you will write down the question. This would be a cue for your note taker, and tell them that you'll get back in touch with them with an answer soon. Then you can follow up with an Iowa CASA staff person to get the answers to any ruminating questions that we need to answer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think oftentimes we get really nervous and either just like make up something or like stutter our way through. And so just be honest, like say, hey, that's a great question. Let me get back to you about that. And I think people will really appreciate that. And it's just a good opportunity also for you to continue building on that relationship, because the more times you have contact with the legislator, the better.
And here's the thing, folks. Legislators are people too. I know it can be a little intimidating to go up to the Capitol and talk to your legislator, but they are people too. I will share with you an experience. I won't name names, but I have been in a car traveling the state with one particular legislator where all the windows in the car were rolled down because that person had just passed gas. So legislators are people too. And hopefully that gives you a little chuckle and just reminds you that even though it may be an intimidating experience, you can just kind of replay that thought through your head as you're talking to your elected officials. Always ask your legislator for their support on whatever issue it is that you're discussing with them. And be sure to take note of support or opposition and the general feel of the conversation. I know Maggie's gonna touch on that a little bit about note taking. So to end the conversation, so you can also feel free to hand off a copy of your talking points to legislators. Any brochures from victim service program in your area is really handy. Legislators like to have that information. And then if there's any news articles that have been published, this is a great way, again, to link the discussion back to real world implications. So hopefully that helps give kind of an overview here of different ways that you can chat with your legislators and engage with them.
All right, so one thing that's super critical when you come to Day at the Capitol, that it's not the first time or the last time that you have spoken to your legislator or that you've attempted to get in contact with them. You want to make yourself known, your organization known to them, and so there are plenty of opportunities to keep that conversation going. Send them a note either by mail or email, or tag them in a Facebook post thanking them. Show up to different events that they're at and make sure to shake their hand and reintroduce yourself. Really any opportunity you get to connect with them, either back in your local area or in Des Moines, is super important. We do have a list or a website that shows all of the like community forums and town hall events that I will send out to you with the other links after this webinar. So make sure to put those on your schedule, and then also just keep checking, as someone stated before, like depending on when different committee hearings are and such, things just are constantly changing. And so you just want to keep checking back at those calendars and making sure that you can connect with them. Another thing is invite them to your organization or any other like event that you have in your community, feel free to invite them. They're always looking for opportunities to have a little bit of publicity, but also just get to know what's happening in their community. So reiterate the issues that are important to you and keep getting to know them. And
Wah, wah.
yeah, and it's okay if you are not able to connect with them. You can, you know, at the day at the Capitol, like I said, things are really busy over there. And so some people only get to see one person instead of, you know, 2 or 3. And so maybe it's a good time to network with your fellow community members. There's going to be a bunch of us that care about the same issues. So that's a good time to kind of strategize about when you're going to approach legislators at different town halls. You know, don't get discouraged at, you know, talking to legislators. I know people kind of are afraid of it sometimes, but just think that you are all the experts. Legislators really don't have the background that you do, and so they rely on you to share with them so that they know how to vote on different issues. It's really important that they hear from you. So you're doing great. And then another point is that at the Capitol, that day at the Capitol, we will be having these little sheets where we'll have you like take notes, so that note taker in your group can write down kind of what you discussed, and if there's any follow-up that we need to do, please, please, please turn them into Iowa CASA staff or ICADVA staff. It's super helpful for our lobbyists that then go back and talk to those legislators after you have and try to build upon the conversation that you had with them that day. So it's very helpful. Here's an example of what that looks like. And so, you know, this is what you'll see that day. Here's an example of something you could write. Anything you can provide is going to be helpful as we continue to build upon these relationships.
So we live in a world where social media is a great way to not only connect with your legislator, but also just kind of have a conversation. Feel free to take photos with each other and with your legislators to share online. A lot of your legislators have Facebook pages, or they're on Twitter or Instagram or any other number of social media sites. You can tag them. Feel free to tag Iowa CASA so that we can like your pics. The one thing that I always like to remind people is to make sure that you have permission from everyone who is in the photo before sharing online. This includes getting permission from your legislators. Most of them will probably say that it's perfectly fine. And the hashtag that we are using for our Advocacy Day is hashtag Advocacy Day IA. I checked on Twitter. No one else is using it.
Woo.
Hopefully we can make it trending for like an hour or something on Twitter. I don't know, guys. It's a thing. We could make it happen. So if your legislator isn't available, we've touched on a lot of these already, but there are many other ways to get in touch with them. You can call them on the phone, email, reach out to them on social media, snail mail, a letter, or get in touch with our office, schedule an in-person meeting. If you're going to be, let's say you live out of town, and if you're going to be back in Des Moines at a later time, try and get a meeting scheduled so you can meet them that way. Another great way to have the conversation with a legislator, and I believe it was mentioned in the comments also, is town hall meetings or community forums. Almost all legislators will have a schedule of town hall meetings in their district, which is listed on their official websites, and I believe Maggie's going to send out a resource as well. Attend these meetings. You can even email your legislator ahead of time, let them know that you'll be attending and that you have issues and to discuss with them. These are great ways to stay engaged with the with not only your elected officials, but the community as a whole.
All right, so this, the next two slides are specific for those of you who work at nonprofits. So we often get questions about what if I'm a nonprofit worker? What if I work at an organization that is a 501c3? Can I lobby? Can I go to the Capitol and talk about this? So it's a bit complicated, and it's, I guess, kind of meant to be broad in the tax code. So what it says is that lobbying should not be a substantial part of your organization's overall daily activities. So there is on the IRS website one like test you can do to see if it's a substantial piece of your overall daily activities. This is most often done by directors and something that advocates won't have to necessarily worry about, but you will want to check with your supervisors about what you can and can't do as part of your work responsibilities. You must fund these activities like lobbying and legislative advocacy on dollars that are not restricted by grants that say you cannot lobby. And so you might have to use those miscellaneous dollars, those like individual donations or those event donations from the community to do these activities. But what you can do is conduct educational meetings and prepare and distribute educational materials. So you can provide your legislators with education, with information, so long as you're not asking them to support anything or oppose anything, and then it would not even be counted as lobbying, right? So that's one way to kind of get around that. The other thing is you cannot support, endorse, or contribute to a political candidate or party. You can definitely support issues like the ones we mentioned that maybe parties or candidates are divided on. So it looks like, yes, this is a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. But you can definitely support those issues. You just can't directly favor or oppose the candidate or party that they're associated with. So you can definitely kind of work around that. And, you know, if you have any questions at all, again, I'll supply the link to the IRS website where you can read the code. And then we can also answer any questions you have. So like I said, here are some helpful resources. We have even more in the publication that we'll send to you after this webinar. One that I highly suggest folks go to is this Iowa Legislative Resources in Civic Education. Yep.
Whoops.
And I can pull it up here. I'll just show you all, if you haven't been here, this is how to find your legislator, by the way, but really you'll go to the Iowa Legislative website, and then you're gonna go over here in the top bar to Resources in Civic Education. And you can learn, you know, as much as you want about the Iowa legislative process. There's really some helpful information. We know that the budget process around funding is pretty confusing, so here's a great resource. Just some great information that I highly suggest you take a look at. Also, when you get to the Capitol that day, the Iowa Legislative Agency has an office with a bunch of these in like paper form, so you can read them, you know, as you're waiting for your legislative representative. So, a lot to ask, how about advocates attending political candidates' public or private events? So good question. Again, always talk to your supervisor, but you're not gonna want to endorse candidates as a representative of your nonprofit organization. So you're gonna have to go as a private citizen and not as a nonprofit representative. Allie says, I invite them, your legislators, to monthly coalition meetings. and keep them on mailing lists for upcoming events. That is an amazing idea. Great job, Allie. I highly suggest everyone does that. Any other questions or comments?
Good segue. Yeah, so we are happy to answer any questions here in the remaining time that we have. We know that we covered a lot of information in a relatively short period of time, but we're here to answer as many questions as we can.
Yeah, Diane asked if there's any specific dress or color to wear on our day at the Capitol. We, in the past, have done like everyone wear a certain color. We have not discussed that this year. I don't think we will, so just make sure you're wearing like professional attire representing your agency. It might be a great idea to have like name tags if you have them for an organization you represent. Otherwise, we will have name tags for anyone that chooses to come. So that is available to you all.
And I know that some folks who have come from a victim service program will have shirts for that program and have everyone in their group wear those shirts. So that's always an option as well.
Yeah. Yeah. One last thing I want to mention is that we're really encouraging you all to bring your communities with you to this event. We want to really flood the Capitol this year and speak about these issues to our representatives. And so anyone that you can bring would be super helpful and a great experience. So if you have survivors in your area that want to tell their story or why this issue or these issues are important to them, they are more than welcome to come. We will have this webinar available afterwards for anyone to view. And so if people want, you know, just a little more background before they head to Day at the Capitol, we can certainly pass this along. But yeah, any community members, allies, board members that you have, bring folks with.
There's another question. Are you selling shirts this year? Iowa CASA is not selling shirts this year. I believe ICADVA might be. ICADVA would be the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence, our sister organization that we partner with every year for Advocacy Day. And sometimes they do have shirts. So keep an eye out for that. Usually if there are shirts that are being sold, they will be at registration at the Wallace Auditorium right first thing as you get there.
And feel free to grab any coalition members, the two of us or anyone else, for any questions or if you need any support leading up to Day at the Capitol or the day of or afterwards. We're really here to support you. We know this is a super important day for representatives to learn more about us and what we care about. So we want to make sure that you are supported. All right, well, thank you all for attending. Again, here's our emails if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
We're so excited.
Yay.
And thank you so much. Thanks for joining us despite the cold weather. I hope many of you are curled up with lots of blankets and or animals today, and thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yep, take care.
Bye, guys.